Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to give things 1 or 2 more minutes so the stragglers can log on, and then we'll go ahead and start. Okay. A warm welcome to you all from both myself, Jennifer McClung, and my colleague with me, Rita De Brito. We are the national contact points for ERC grants here in Switzerland. We're your specialists on everything you need to know relating to ERC. And like I say, we would like to welcome you to our national information session on the ERC Consolidator Grant 2026. As probably most of you know, we are now, as researchers based in Switzerland, eligible to apply for all ERC grants. So, along the lines of this happy news, I would like to talk you through the people that we have gathered together today to present you with very useful and timely information about this upcoming call. Well, as you know, the call is open, but the deadline is in January, next January. So, after a few words from myself, we will hand over quickly to Dr. Marilena Plezu. She's joining us from the ERC Executive Agency in Brussels. She is currently the call coordinator for the Consolidator grant, and she'll be talking to us about the call conditions and give you specific advice for this current call. Then after that, we'll hear from Professor Giacomo Indiveri from the University of Zurich. He's previously held the Consolidator grant, and he'll talk to us about his experience with both the writing and submission process as well as the grant itself. Then we will hear from Professor Michael Meyer, who's based at the University of Fribourg. He's been a Consolidator grant panel member 3 times, so he too has a lot of expertise to share with us today. Then after that, we'll move on to a general Q&A. So please do, if you can, save your questions for this general Q&A. We'll allow you to unmute and ask your questions, so it will be a bit of a discussion. And then a few words from us at the closing, and we will go to our separate breakout meeting rooms that we've designed for each host institution. So before we get started, just a few words on the netiquette for today. You'll find that your microphones and cameras are all disabled at this point. This is really just to make things easier for our speakers so they don't get distracted. Again, during the Q&A session, you'll have the opportunity to raise your hand, and then we'll unmute you and you can ask your question. If you can, please keep your questions in the Q&A session to topics of general interest. If you have specific questions about your individual case, feel free to email us directly. You'll receive these slides, and here's our email address that you can contact both Rita and myself at. So today, if you could please only use the chat for urgent IT issues. If you have questions, you can save them for the Q&A session at the end, or you can even use the Q&A function that you'll see on the top of your screen as well. But the chat really should be reserved for just specifically IT issues to make our job easier. Okay, lastly, this webinar is being recorded, except for the Q&A session at the end, and you will receive both the recording as well as the slides in the next few days. On that note, I would like to stop sharing and welcome our first speaker, Marilena Plezu. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll let you start sharing your slides. Marilena did her PhD in transplantation biology before then going to the US to do her postdoctoral studies. She's been working at the ERC Executive Agency in Brussels for 9 years, and she now has been the Consolidator grant call coordinator for 3 years running. So again, she has a lot of expertise and experience that she is prepared to share with us today. Thank you so much in advance, Marilena. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jenny, for this kind introduction. I hope you can see my full screen, presenter's mode, by now. First of all, thank you for your interest in DRC funding programs. What I plan to do today is to first provide you with an overview of DRC and its funding schemes, highlighting some eligibility and the evaluation aspects, and afterwards I will provide some tips on how to prepare your proposal. The ERC, most of you perhaps are familiar with what ERC is, but just in case, ERC is part of the Horizon Europe, the current framework program for research and innovation funding, which is running from 2021 to 2027. The ERC has a share of 17% within this program, which means about 16 billion euro for the entire 7 years duration of the program. What is the European Research Council? Furthermore, it is an EU funding organization recognized for financing excellent frontier research. The driver of ERC is its scientific council with full authority over ERC strategy, which is implemented by the ERC executive agency where I'm actually working. The ERC Scientific Council comprises 22 prominent scientists, including its president, Professor Maria Leptin. What actually matters when applying for an ERC grant? The excellence. The answer is very simple. ERC promotes the scientific excellence as the sole evaluation criterion, supporting individual scientists and not project consortia by funding through international peer reviewing frontier research in all fields of science and humanities with no predefined topics via so-called bottom-up approach. Excellence as a criterion is applied to both the research project and the principal investigator, and I will expand on this a little bit later. Why should you consider applying for an ERC grant? I hope I can convince you, if you are not already convinced, because you could choose a research topic of your own choice, because you will gain financial autonomy for up to 5 years, during which you could exclusively focus on your research. Importantly, the ERC funding schemes allow for a high degree of flexibility, allowing you to to move actually with the grant within the EU member states or associated countries. Also, due to its reputation, you could attract on your grant the best team members and collaborators, promoting your career and the chances of further success in acquiring additional research funding and, of course, even more recognition. Here are our funding schemes. The main funding schemes that ERC offers are the starting grant, consolidator grant, advanced grant, and the synergy grant scheme. Just to start with the consolidator grant that you are mostly interested in, it is aimed to researchers having from 7 to 12 years after PhD. To this purpose, they receive up to 2 million euros for a 5-year period. The starting grant scheme is meant for PIs that have between 2 and 7 years since PhD, and for the purpose of implementing their grant, they receive up to 1.5 million euros for the same 5-year period. The advanced grant scheme is meant for already established researchers, leaders in their field, and they receive a lump sum, up to 2.5 million euros for up to 5 years. The synergy grant scheme that you are very welcome to participate, you are encouraged to participate too as a consolidator grant applicant, and also the starting grant profile is encouraged to apply to this scheme, is meant for between 2 and 4 principal investigators who synergize their efforts to tackle a fundamental research problem that cannot be tackled if they would address it individually. To this purpose, they receive up to 10 million euros for up to 6 years. And interestingly, one PI can be based outside EU or associated country. In addition to these funding schemes, ERC offers for the moment one, and for the future another one funding scheme. Let's start with the proof of concept, which is meant for already for PIs that have already had holding an ERC grant. And this proof of concept grant is meant to help them bridge the gap between their frontier research tackled within their previous main ERC grant, and the earliest stage of marketable innovation. They receive a lump sum of up to 150,000 euros for up to 18 months. And lastly, as you may have already heard about, and our president has made an announcement on the ERC website, there is a new instrument announced by the Scientific Council, but more details about it will follow in due course. This new instrument will offer a larger amount of money, up to 7 million for a larger period of time, up to 7 years. It is planned that the new funding instrument will be included in the amendment version of the ERC Work Program 2026 that is expected to be adopted by the end of this year. So if you are interested, stay tuned for the news to come. Besides these standard grant sizes that I mentioned for the grants, there are some new features as from Work Program 2026. For starting Consolidator, Advanced and Synergy grants, besides the standard maximum grant amounts as presented before, additional funding can be requested to cover specific eligible costs when justified in the proposal as necessary to carry out the work. Basically, for starting Consolidator and Advanced grant, up to 1 million additional funding can be requested by applicants already based in EU or member state or associated country to cover any cost that is fully justified for the implementation of the project. Actually, nothing changed here, but the new feature is that these costs are not limited to certain categories as before. For example, purchase of major equipment, access to large facilities, other major experimental and fieldwork costs. So this additional cost is not limited to can be beyond, but has to be fully justified as needed for the implementation of the project, as also before. So the difference is there is no categories. You can request for anything that you deem necessary to top up your project to assure its successful implementation. Another new feature concerns the applicants currently based outside European Union who can request additional funding of up to 2 million euros to facilitate the startup and the relocation of their lab or team to EU or associated country for the purpose of taking up the ERC grant. Yeah, so pay attention. This is now augmented for this category of applicants from outside EU. Now I will highlight some eligibility aspects because you would need to assure that you are eligible before pursuing applying to a Consolidator grant call. The reference date for the calculation of the eligibility window is the 1st of January of the year of the call as a general rule. And based on this, you can figure out whether you are eligible or not. For example, to be eligible to apply for the COC 2026, you must have a PhD or equivalent doctoral degree with a successful defense date between the 1st of January 2014 and the 31st of December 2018 inclusively. For those of you who are no longer eligible based on the standard eligibility window, please note that your eligibility window can be extended for well-documented situations occurring before the call deadline. And in the next slide, I will just summarize for you these categories. Also importantly, when preparing your proposal, please be sure that you could commit at least 40% of your working time on a Consolidator grant proposal and a minimum of 50% of your working time in an EU member state or associated country. Also, importantly, to remember and to check if you previously applied for an ERC starting or Consolidator grant call and received a B or a C score at step 1, please check if you are not bound to any resubmission restrictions. Now let's see the set categories for those of you who are no longer eligible to apply based on the standard eligibility window. So these are the categories that you can find details about in the guide for applicants, and also there you can find all the information in respect of supporting documentation for each of the categories. So the categories are maternity leave, paternity and parental leave, long-term illness, a few or a close family member, disability, also clinical training, major disaster, including also armed conflict, also seeking asylum, and from work program 2026 there is a new category introduced based on which you can be eligible to apply for extension is in case you've been a victim of any kind of violence, including gender-based. Once again, you find detailed supporting documentation information in a guide for applicants. Now, for those of you who applied before, here I would like to make a note to remind you that there is a new PhD eligibility reference date rule since Work Program 2023. The reference date towards the calculation of the eligibility period shall be the certified date of your successful PhD defense. Before it was the PhD awarding date, but the Scientific Council decided to modify this in order to for the date to reflect the real academic age instead of the administrative age of a principal investigator. Why? Because in different countries the rules may be different in respect of awarding, issuing the awarding certificates. Some provide the diploma right away. Some may, for some, may take even 1 year and more to issue the awarding certificate. So this modification was welcomed by the scientific community, but please note if your PhD certificate does not show the PhD defense date on it, please take care in due time to ask your PhD awarding institution to provide you with a written confirmation stating the defense date. Also related to the eligibility, there are some changes as from Work Program 2027 that the Scientific Council envisaged to implement. But very importantly, to be confirmed once the Work Program 2027 is published, sometimes during the summer of 2026, after the Scientific Council assesses the outcome of the Work Program 2026. So this is only for you to know that these changes may come to life. And I put here a link to a letter of the Scientific Council President, Professor Maria Leptin, where she explains the background and rationale of the changes. So be welcome to read and find more about the rationale behind the plan modification. Basically, according to the plan changes, the starting grant applicants will be eligible to apply for a grant immediately after successfully defending their PhD and at any time within the following 10-year period. For the consolidated grant applicants, they will be eligible to apply between 5 and 15 years after defending their PhD. And another change would be that researchers will not be able to be awarded more than one starting grant and one consolidator grant during their entire career. Yeah, so let's wait for the Work Program 2027 to confirm these plan changes. Here, I would like to show you the percentage of submissions by year since PhD for Consolidator and starting grants for the last 4 years. For both COG and starting calls, the highest share of submission came from the PIs having 11 years since PhD, and for starting grants 6 years since PhD, as you can see towards the end of the eligibility window. And why I show you this in light of the next slide, because we advise you not to wait until reaching this later stage in your career to apply. So if you ask yourself, shall I apply now or wait another year? When one looks at the funded proposals by year since PhD and by gender for the last year starting and consolidator grant calls, one can see that the success rate stays quite flat across most of the eligibility window, with some drops at the beginning of the eligibility window, feature that we have historically seen for the previous calls too. So the message from here, from this diagram, is that you should not exclude yourself from applying by waiting to get more seniorship. So our advice is to apply or reapply as soon as possible. Get feedback from the panels, improve your application, and reapply during your eligibility window. Now I will provide a short overview of the submission and the evaluation process, including the recent changes in the ERC work program. I will start by reminding you that the deadline for the Consolidator grant call is 13th of January 2026. If there are potential starting grantees applicants here, the deadline is tomorrow for the starting 2026. I will start with an overview of the evaluation process for those of you that are not familiar with, highlighting the changes. The ERC grants are individual calls, meaning they have a single submission phase, but a two-step evaluation. So I'm speaking about starting, consolidator, and advance here. The process is the same. At step one, this step starts with the remote assessment only by panel members who are generalists in the field of the proposals, and they assess at this stage only part B1, so the administrative part B1 of your proposal, including the part 1 of the scientific proposal and the CV plus your track record. So here I would like to make it clear, not to avoid any confusion between part B1 and part 1. So part B1, part B2 refers to the administrative forms in the system that you fill in, and part 1 and part 2 refers to the scientific proposal. So after assessing the part 1 of your scientific proposal plus the CV and the track record remotely, the panel members meet in Brussels on site, and they will discuss each proposal and rank them towards the final outcomes. So for the rejected proposal, the outcome is either B or C. And from work program 2024, we have a new score called A non-invited proposals, who actually fulfill the eligibility criterion, but because of the limit of maximum 44 proposals that can be passed to step 2, they receive this A non-invited score, which actually allows them to reapply next year if they wish. They are not bound to resubmission restrictions as the B and C scores at step 1. Why this maximum 44 proposals threshold has been introduced by the Scientific Council? Because of logistical reasons, there is impossible to accommodate more than 44 interviews at step 2. So what happens next to these retained proposals? They go to step 2 evaluation process, where they are seen by both the panel members, but this time together with the remote reviewers. who are specialists in the field of the proposal. So they assess both the part one of the scientific proposal, the part two of the scientific proposal, which is included in the administrative part B2, and they also assess the resources and the time commitment of the PI. This comes as a report extracted from the administrative part A of your proposal. So after they assess this information remotely, there is a panel meeting attended only by the panel members on site in Brussels, where they meet to discuss again the proposals and interview the applicant. The outcome of this step 2 evaluation is um, either an A score when the proposal meets fully the excellence criterion and is considered for funding in case sufficient funding is available, so within the boundaries of available funding, and B, when the proposals meet some but not all elements of the excellence criterion. Here you see the panel structure in work program 2026 that remains not changed as compared to the last year. We have the same structure, the same keywords associated to each panel. The three scientific ERC domains comprise 28 panels, 9 panels in LS, 11 panels in physical sciences and engineering, and 8 panels in social sciences and humanities domain. I want to just stress it out here that the Scientific Council regularly scrutinizes the panel structure for scientific and operational reasons to take into account new scientific developments, improve coherence, and balance proposal numbers across panels. When filling your application, you will be asked to choose a primary panel, and you can flag also a secondary panel in case your proposal is of cross-panel, cross-disciplinary nature. In this case, the reviewers from both panels will be used to assess your proposal, and it's very important to explain in part B1 of your proposal why your proposal is of cross-panel nature. Like this, the panel chair will be better informed to choose the right evaluators for your proposal. Please note that the panel keywords, the keywords associated to each panel are there only to guide you. So they are not meant as a complete scientific classification. They do not reflect priorities. As mentioned, any topic field and subfield is welcome, whether mentioned or not in this ERC panel structure, yeah, based on the bottom-up approach that characterizes ERC frontier research. Here I would like to take advantage to tackle a rumor that circulates in the scientific community that to choose strategically your panel in order to increase your chances of success, which is not true, because the budget is distributed among the panels as a function of demand, which means the success rate is more or less equal among panels, and therefore you should choose the panel that is right for you, yeah, right for you in respect of your proposal. Proposal structure as from 2026 is the following. Part A, meaning the administrative form, including the requested budget and resources. Administrative part B1, including the part 1 of your scientific proposal. Importantly here, you should detail the overall idea, objectives, and approach. So it should be focused on the idea of your research. And also the part B1 contains your CV and track record. The administrative part B2 of your proposal includes the part 2 of your scientific proposal, which is limited to 7 pages. where you should focus on the implementation of your idea, including methodology, feasibility, risk assessment, mitigating measures. And also this part B2 contains your funding ID. And for your information, this funding ID is not used by evaluators to evaluate you. So funding ID is not an evaluation criterion. It is there only to be scrutinized at the grant agreement preparation phase to avoid any overlap in funding. Also, your proposal should include the host institution support letter that you should obtain in advance, and a PhD certificate, a copy of it displaying the successful PhD defense date. In case, as mentioned, it doesn't display this date, a certificate should be requested from the awarding institution. In respect of the research assessment, the novelties there, I invite you to read this letter from the Scientific Council President about the why and what of the ERC changes, very useful. In brief, the Scientific Council made it clear that more weight should be given to the project than to the past achievements of the PI. So these changes that I speak you about here have been implemented since Work Program 2024. Yeah, so they are relevant for the current calls that you are interested in. Basically, the panels are now primarily evaluating the groundbreaking nature, ambition, and feasibility of the scientific approach, and at the same time, the intellectual capacity and creativity of the PI, with a focus on the extent to which the PI has the required qualities to scientific qualities to successfully implement the project. In addition to this change, there is a change in the proposal structure that I haven't mentioned in the previous slide. So now the CV and the track record are simplified and combined. And besides the personal details, you are now invited to list up to 10 research outputs. It's up to you to choose these outputs. Can be other than scientific papers, also if relevant for your field. Also, you are invited to provide a list of selected example of scientific peer recognition, for example, prizes. You may also include additional relevant information on career breaks, unusual career path, COVID impact, any particular contributions to the research community. These are actually meant to provide context to the panel when assessing your research achievements and peer recognition in relation to your career stage. And all of these were done to make your assessment as a PI more qualitative than quantitative. Now we arrive at the last section of my talk regarding tips and tricks, and I will not spend too much on it because the next speakers will provide you with details, extensive details on this and tips. I would like to start with also breaking some misconceptions, and one I already mentioned, that the budget is distributed equally among the scientific panels in relation to the demand, actually. So not equally. I just correct myself. It's distributed as a function of demand. So if more proposals are received, more budget will be allocated to the respective panels. So this assures that the success rate is more or less equal among panels. And once again, please choose the panel that is really right for your proposal. This is the rule to follow. Another misconception is regarding the publication record. There are rumors saying that you should have nature and science papers to be successful. This is not true, because as I showed you, in light of the new changes, it is up to you what outputs you choose to present among the 10 required ones that represent your research and your field. So this can be other than publications. Also, the host institution is not an evaluation criterion, so do not target institutions that are top in rankings. This is not a criterion for ERC research. The success rate is not linked to the academic age, as I showed you in the graph that I presented. Also, keep in mind that proposals shorter than 5 years are also welcome. Um, Also, please keep in mind that an ERC grant is not a consortium proposal. Therefore, please not include unnecessary partners or collaborators. These are, of course, welcome just in situations, for example, to fill the gap in the expertise that is missing in your team. And the last reminder is that the panel descriptors, keywords, are not priorities of the ERC, so any topic field is equally welcome, including applied research. Doesn't matter what type of idea, based on the bottom-up approach principle. Here, I hope that this will help you understand what should be included in part 1, part 2 of your scientific proposal. When preparing your proposal, always keep in mind that part B1 will be seen only by the panel members who are generalists, and the part 2 will be seen besides the panel members by the remote reviewers who are specialists. What does this imply? To use to adapt your language according to your audience. In part 1, our advice would be to find the right balance between using a generalist language and providing relevant information. To focus on your research idea, just ask yourself the question, is this idea that I have one that is worth pursuing? Here in part 1, you should outline the current state of knowledge and ask yourself how this idea will advance it. Assure that your idea is original, creative, ambitious enough, and highlight this in part 1 of your proposal. Explain any scientific questions you plan to ask and the objectives in brief, and also present your overall approach again in brief. So overall, be concise and clear for the generalists to understand you and make them curious to see the part 2 of your scientific proposal. In step 2, as mentioned, panel members and remote referees assess the full proposal, part B1 and part 2, plus resources and time commitment. So here you should ask yourself the main question, can my idea be implemented realistically, and if so, in the manner and with the approach that I propose? And to do so, please assure that you are not redundant with part B1, part 1 of your scientific proposal. So here focus on the implementation of your idea, come with details, including on feasibility, because feasibility will be assessed only in step 2. Provide also extensive details about methodology, your work plan, and your risk assessment and mitigation measures. Also here in part 2 of your scientific proposal, you can add any information relevant that was you believe was not sufficiently explained in the administrative part A on the budget and resources. Yeah, because mainly this information should go in the administrative part A, but you can also fill in with relevant details on this in the context of implementation of your research. The last advice here would be to read carefully the evaluation questions in the work program while prepare your application and try to answer those in your proposal. In case you are in the situation, luckily situation to be invited to the interview. First of all, understand the type of your audience. You will be there in front of scientists talking with them. So you are asked to provide a presentation on science. And the advice here would be to avoid a business-like presentation and focus in your presentation on scientific questions and answers, because the panel want to see that actually the ideas put forward are yours, yeah, not the ideas of supervisors or team members. If you recognize a panel member during your interview, please do not approach them during the evaluation process regarding your proposal or your interview, as we have a special procedure in place that may lead to the rejection of your proposal from the respective call if such contact takes place. Another advice is to anticipate the questions by knowing the challenges in your work plan and methodology, and by knowing your research area and competitors. Also, practice in advance and assure that you keep the allocated time. Usually, you will have around 5-10 minutes for the presentation itself, and 15 to 20 minutes for the questions and answers. Here are my very last key messages. Once again, don't exclude yourself from participating in ERC calls based on misconceptions. If you have an idea that you think that would make a significant impact, just put it forward now, because in a very dynamic scientific era, your idea next year may be outdated. So don't hesitate to think big and to dare, yeah, to apply. You can look for examples of funded projects on our website. You can use a tool to search by your field of interest. You can find there also testimonials, tutorials. If you fail, try again. As our data shows, resubmissions have a higher success rate, typically 1.5 times higher. So just apply, get feedback from applicants, reinforce your application, and try again when possible, when you are eligible. Also, consult carefully our documents, the work program, information for applicants, guide for peer reviewers, register in time on the portal, get all your documentation ready, also including written consent from collaborators before the submission deadline. So each collaborator mentioned in the proposal, you have to get their consent, because we have ticking box in the application form online system that may block your application to be submitted if not ticked. So be sure that you have all consents and all information well before the deadline. Also, do not hesitate to contact us for any question you might have. You can use our functional mailboxes. There is always somebody behind it that will answer to you very quickly. So for the Consolidator grant, you have the functional mailbox here. Don't hesitate to use it. And my last advice is also to watch you might find useful the ERC classes with practical tips updated by my colleagues, scientific officers at the ERC, which are available on YouTube. These newly available versions now take into consideration the mentioned updates in the evaluation process. So please watch them and get useful hints. Last but not least, you can of course follow us on our various media channels. And with this, I finished my presentation. And yeah, if we still have time, I'm ready to take questions. If not, I pass the floor to Jenny. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marilena. I think we're going to move straight on. But before that, thank you again for your presentation and all that invaluable information. Extremely useful for our applicants. If you can stick around for the Q&A at the end, that would be great.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I would like to present our next speaker. As I say, moving straight onwards, we're going to head now to Professor Giacomo Indiveri, who is actually who has a dual professorship. Marilyn, if you want to stop sharing, that way Giacomo can start sharing his slides. As I mentioned, Professor Indiveri has a dual professorship at both the University of Zurich in the Faculty of Science, as well as at ETH, where he is in the Department of Information Technology and Electrical Engineering. He actually got his PhD in computer science from Genoa, the University of Genoa in Italy, and he is something of an ERC star, having had already a starting grant and a Consolidator grant. For our purposes today, we're going to focus on your experience with the Consolidator grant. I hand over to you. Thank you so much for joining us yet again, and the floor is yours. We can't hear you. You're still muted.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me now.
All good. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. It was really useful to listen to Marilena's presentation. Yes, I can give you some advice based on the experience I had with this Consolidator proposal that I submitted in 2016. It was called Neuro Agents, Neuromorphic Electronic Agents from Sensory Processing to Autonomous Cognitive Behavior. And indeed, it was something that followed up from the starting grant ERC proposal that was called neuromorphic processors. So the challenge was really to find some excellent idea, like, providing excellence, but that was not incremental based on the previous proposal. So the idea now was, if we did the brains of autonomous agents in the previous, what do we need to do to create complete autonomous agents, including the robotics and the sensory processing and the perception and the sort of intelligence in this new project. So this was the idea behind the Neuro Agents proposal. So yes, it's always a balance. You have to be able to use your expertise, but you also have to show that you have a new idea that will lead to a new research line with excellence. So this was the challenge. And now I won't go into the details of the technicalities for that, but I'm happy to explain the science behind it. But the process involved, of course, writing the proposal, like you heard. In my case, I found it really useful to spend, you need to spend enough time to actually write it, clear your mind, clear the idea, and polish it. But what I found to be particularly useful was to take a break for even 1 month or even more, and go back to it later, so that you see it with a new light or with new experience and new perspective. And that would allow you to polish it even more, or even change some of the proposed ideas. So this is what I found to be very, very useful. It happened by chance the first time, but I did it on purpose the second time for the Consolidator grant. And in fact, I recently submitted an advanced grant, fingers crossed, and I did the same. I on purpose took a break so that I could see the flaws better after taking a pause. We heard that it's really useful to study the ERC panel. I mean, the panels, they have different keywords. So from the keywords, especially if you have an interdisciplinary proposal, it might not be obvious to figure out which one is the best panel. I think it's really useful to study also see who is on the panel, and study see the expertise of the people in the panel themselves. During this process, then I got the good news that I was invited to the interview. That's really great. You know, you already passed a very, very critical step. But then the panic came. You know, what do you need to do, and how can you make sure that you can pass the interview stage? And for preparing for the interview, it's really important. We heard before that you really should rehearse many times. In my case, depending on the panel, you can have a few slides, or in my case, I could only prepare one A4 sheet with a summary of the slide of the project. And that was very important. So it took me quite some time to figure out what to put on this one page, and to prepare the description of the project. I also only had 5 minutes, so I spent most of the time rehearsing and again every single word, so that I would stay within the 5-minute limit. The 5-minute limit is very strict. So at the end of this 5 minutes, even if you're halfway through a sentence or a word, you will get blocked. So it's really important you stay within the time limit. What I realize now that I did not do, because I was so focused on the 5 minutes, I did not spend enough time to answer all the possible questions that came up. So the word of advice is also try to think about all possible questions and how to address them. So your research was extremely useful. You should go to all the events like this one, but I imagine there will be more. And just to give you an idea of how actually it really made the difference for me, I just want to show you the summary slide I prepared before getting feedback from your research, and the one after. So the one before was a summary of the projects. This NeuroAgents project, I told you, the idea was developing the theory of this brain-inspired computation using the hardware that was done in the previous project, and then applying it onto robotic platforms. I had some information on my background, my degrees, and then a lot of text with pictures. And this was what I thought would be a useful slide to present. And after all the feedback, the whole slide was changed into this one, where I removed the information on my laurea, my degrees and my postdocs, and I guess the reviewers by then knew. I actually showed what happened since the proposal, because several months passed in between, and I showed all the new developments and new results I obtained. And then I just broke it down into these four, why, how, what, and impact, and wow. And I managed to be able to go through all these points, summarizing them in 5 minutes. But at least this piece of paper was with all of the panel members throughout the questions, so they could go back to it in case they wanted to know more details. And finally, some more tips to hope to give you advice, so hope you can make a successful proposal, is to really follow all the DRC document instructions to the letters. You really should study these documents in detail. Take advantage of all the information that's there: tutorials, tips, YouTube videos. And also, because it's useful, also the reviewers get instructions on how to evaluate the proposal. If you use exactly the same keywords, the same terms, it's easier for the evaluators to check the boxes and see whether you fulfilled the various requirements. So, for example, when I was writing the proposal, the word transformative was mentioned a few times in the various instructions, and so that was important to show why was the proposal transformative, what parts were transformative or not. In more recent times, there is now the term innovation is becoming quite important, and so also there it's useful to mention what is the innovation potential, why is there a high potential for innovation, and so on. For the two parts, part one and part two, also we've heard already from Marilena the tips, but I reiterate. You should impress the reviewers, the evaluators, as generalists, non-experts, and then show that you are the expert, and the right methods, you have the right tools and expertise in the part two, where you can convince your peers and experts that are also in your field of research in part two, with the methodology and all the other details. I already mentioned it's useful if you are undecided on which one is the best panel for you, not in terms of strategy, but in terms of really the ones that could really evaluate your proposal in the best possible way. It's useful to see who are the members, even though you don't know exactly who are the members of your particular one, but at least by seeing the backgrounds of the members of the panel, it's going to give you a better intuition on which panel to choose in case you are undecided, in case your proposal doesn't fit from the keywords in any specific one. When I was doing the interview, I realized that it was important to show that you are well aware of the state of the art, that you are a key player in your area of research, and that you know your peers, you know what the recent developments are, you know who is doing which parts, and this was really, really helpful. I think it did make a difference in the interview. And the interview is really important. So you should practice as much as possible, both with generalists, with colleagues that are not exactly in your area of research, to make sure that you can make them excited about your proposal, and also with experts, your colleagues that know the details of your work, because then you will be able to answer challenging questions that come from the external evaluations. But also, it's important to think also about other questions like, what if there is a conflict in your team? How will you manage it? What if there are problems with your students? These types of questions might also come up, so it's good to prepare for that. This is the final point. The good presentation, the 5 minutes or 10 minutes are really, really important. The time limit is really important, but also think about what possible questions could come, and having quick answers is also a really, really important part of the interview. And this brings me to the end of this presentation. It was quite quick, but I'm happy to leave the extra time for questions.
Thank you so much, Giacomo, for this great talk, very precise and to the point. I think we'll have many questions, and we will reserve them to the Q&A session, so we will ask you for you to stay with us. Thank you so much. And with that, I move to our next speaker. It is my great pleasure to introduce you Professor Meyer. Already Jenny presented us earlier. So Professor Meyer is a professor in biophysics at University of Freiburg since 2015. Before that, spent a decade at Ann Arbor at University of Michigan. And he joined us today as member of the LS1 panel, having served in this role already 3 times, if I'm not mistaken. So welcome and thank you for being here with us today. So my first question is, I would like to know about the evaluation process, and so both Marinella and Giacomo already alluded a little bit about it, but from the panel perspective. So when assessing proposals, how does the panel apply the evaluation criteria? And more specifically, step 1, so when only part 1 is reviewed, what are you really looking forward to decide whether this proposal can go then move forward to the next step?
Yes, thank you, Rita. Thanks. Happy to be here. Welcome, everyone. I will try to provide a little bit the perspective from the other side, the people who then look at all these amazing proposals and try to make the best decision to really find ultimately the ones that we think should be funded. And this is very difficult. I will tell you this right away. And every year or every time we do this, we have to make decisions where we walk away and think, oh no, now there's several that could not get funded simply because at some point you hit the budget limit. So also be aware that if this doesn't work out, it might well have been that a majority on the panel would have very much liked to fund your proposal, but just at some point hits the hard limit of the available budget. Okay, but back to this first question. What are we looking at? And I think it was specifically for the part B1. Maybe just to give you a little bit of background, you need to realize that the people on the panel will rarely be exact experts on the area that you exactly propose. Sometimes there's one, maybe sometimes 2 experts in your field, but sometimes none. So I think what's probably the most important task to accomplish is that you clearly spell out the importance and the creativity of your idea. This was mentioned now in both previous slides, but I just want to reinforce that from the side of us who receive this later. It's clear that you have to bring across that this is an important topic that really should be researched, and that you can communicate that clearly. If that ends up being super difficult, then maybe it would be good to consider a different research project. I would say if you really struggle very, very hard to phrase the importance of this project, maybe it's not the very best for the ERC. It could be for other mechanisms more specialized. But for this, there has to be some potential for a true breakthrough. Ideally, this will really make a difference if this will be funded and successful. Maybe just one more thing that is also important specifically for this information session of the Consolidator. That's the one where I am a panel member. The Consolidator grant now looks also, in addition to excellence, to this aspect of consolidating a research program. And what we like to see there is some evidence for independence. At the starter level, that is much less important, but at the consolidator level, you would like to see that this person has now established some research program, is successfully acquiring funding and can sustain this project, and would now like to make it even better and take the next step. So independence is important, and we sometimes, especially out of some countries, this is not typically Switzerland, do have the question, how independent are some of these people, in particular when they stay, often do a PhD somewhere, go for a postdoc, come back to the same lab, and are then a group leader in that lab. That makes it very difficult. You have then one more opportunity to bring that independence across, and that would be at the interview stage. So if we're in doubt, we will tend, and the research project seems like a great idea, we will tend to invite them and then explore that question. So if you should fit that mold where independence is maybe not quite so clear, you should really be prepared in your interview to make it very clear. Really, I would address that proactively.
Okay, very good. You already ticked some of my questions, but it's good. So let's say at step one, it's quite important or overall to show this independence, but also that what you have, it's really a groundbreaking idea that may really will move forward the state of the art.
Most important is the idea.
Exactly. Moving a little bit, so once the proposal gets to step two, and this is a question that we also get from many applicants. So what is the balance between the external reviewers evaluation and the interview itself, and which weights more? How much do panels use or base their judgments on the external reviewers? And maybe as a follow-up, did it already happened many times, or do you want to tell us something about if panels ever significantly diverge from the external reviewers' assessment?
Okay. So I would really say here both are important. We will, of course, very carefully read those external reviews. That is critically important, especially if we're not experts in this field. We need to know, is this really at the very forefront of this field? And is this also to some extent realistic? Of course, you should be ambitious, and of course, not all of it is clear to work out, but it also has to somehow make sense. And for that, we look very careful at these external reviews. So, and here, what typically, and I just should point this out, I just came back from a panel just 2 weeks ago or something, so it's very, very fresh in my mind. What happens is, you always have some proposals where pretty much all our assessments are extremely good, and then that is matched by all the external reviews. So those are clear-cut cases. If then the interview also works out, it's easy. But there are some where you get, for example, from the external reviews, a mix, pretty much almost some of them very, very strong. This can be up to 9, 10 external reviews in some cases. And then in some of them may be critical. sometimes recommend, which is so you can highly recommend, or not recommend for funding. And we even have sometimes highly and some not recommend. And then, of course, we look very, very carefully what might have been the reasons here, in particular the critical ones. Are there, can we see that point, or is that maybe addressed by the other person and maybe not quite as problematic as it may have been first judged by this one external referee? Then we try to look at all of that. And then there's a discussion. Of course, we discuss amongst each other, and people, there's a so-called lead reviewer who will then make arguments and usually try to be in favor of the proposal. And then comes eventually the interview, if it goes to that stage. And then the questions from the external referees, we will try to address all of those. In particular, the ones that are maybe could be most critical or damaging or something. You try to get this out of the way. Let's see what the candidate has to say about that. So you do have this chance. And I just want to do a little plug in here. In my opinion, this is one of the strongest reasons why you should apply somewhat early, because you will get then these referee comments. This will be sent to you, and you will now, for your next application, be able to prepare for those.
Yeah.
I think this is a huge benefit. I would strongly recommend not to miss that opportunity. So whatever you do in your time planning, make sure you have this, hope for having one of these interviews plus all the comments sent to you. So you can now, first of all, you had this brutal experience of this interview. I can only give this back, what was said earlier. And I say this also, I have now, I think 5 times applied for an advance grant, and I made it 4 times to the interview, at least to the last stage. At the beginning, they didn't have interviews. And I find it also personally brutal, this interview. So it really is good to prepare for it, but it is very helpful if you've done it once, at least once before, or even maybe several times.
Okay, great. Going a little bit, you already allude how important it is also the PI and to show the independence. And my question is, how closely does the panel examine the CV? What counts as major achievements in your view? And just a curiosity, do panels still discuss applicants' age index or use metrics to assess PI's excellence? So just to be clear on that.
Yes, it's important. So I can say very clearly, no, we do not discuss age index in the panel where I serve. Remember, this is LS1, yes, structural biology. Yes. We don't do it. There might be other panels, I don't know, but in our case, it's very strongly is an absolute no-go. And I know others shouldn't do it either. Having said that, of course, in some way, you need to assess if this is realistic, that this person might really be able to pull this off. Ultimately, we have to see, is there a chance for success for this proposal? And of course, you would like to see that people kind of bring the qualification that it takes to really successfully lead such an ambitious, creative, game-changing project. It's obviously super difficult to do. And that is also why then in some cases where we are not so sure maybe about that aspect, you then tend to invite them to the interview, or not, if you can, if it's within the limits of what's possible in inviting people. Now, again, this is always, very often you have a population where this is pretty obvious. The proposal is great, and also somehow the previous accomplishments just somehow are in line. But there are these other ones where this may not be so clear, and then ideally, if the proposal seems very interesting, we will try to invite and then assess. And yes, you learn a lot from this interview. Now, of course, unfortunately, it's also, of course, dependent on how well you perform in such an interview. And this is really tough to make this in 5 minutes and then 100% get all your points across. There's one other thing maybe that one could say. It's, of course, helpful if you can be concise, if you can relatively concisely answer your question, because that allows more questions to be asked. And maybe one thing to consider is, if the panel wants to hear more about a certain answer, we are not so shy at asking. You should probably try, and this makes it only more difficult, try to avoid going on and on and on, not because they may not be able to get to some critical questions. Ideally, try to find a good, get to the point, give your answer, and if they need to know more, they will probably ask about that. Don't go on and on. I don't think it's a good idea. Yeah.
Okay, we also heard, and so also a curiosity, so from Marlena, she already explained if your proposal is at the intersection of different fields, so we can apply. So, but in practical terms, how does this really work if you have a interdisciplinary proposal? So how do panels deal with that? And would you say that there is also a different success rate between submissions to one versus two panels? At least for the experience that you have in LS1. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So we have this case every once in a while where a proposal has been submitted to several panels. We just had one that we in LS1 reviewed that was on AI, very heavily on AI. We do not currently have an AI expert in the LS1 Life Sciences panel. This will probably change in the future, will become more important. But this one was sent to us, and in all honesty, we found it very difficult to really assess ultimately the value of this proposal. It was sent to us from some other panel, and these guys also somehow, I think they were more computational, but they then couldn't judge about the chemistry that was very heavily in there. This was about developing drugs using AI. And we ultimately, though, said, okay, now it's on our table. We will do our best, and we will select the best external referees that we can get. And we will, in this case, more heavily rely then on them. We moved forward to the interview level, and that was quite informative. And I feel like we were certainly able, in the end, to make what I would hope was the right decision in this case.
Mm-hmm. So another area where applicants often also ask about is the budget. Are there any specific aspects that panel members look at for the budgets during the evaluation process, and how likely is it that panels accept budget requests for additional funding?
Yeah, we can go into that. So maybe it's a good thing to view the budget as an opportunity. I need to do this myself also more. It's an opportunity to better develop your proposal. You should really carefully consider, do you have the right budget? What do I need to be successful here? Is this really making sense? If I actually got this money, how exactly would I allocate it? And if you have done this very well, it will help you in the questions, but it will also just make it more clear you really thought this through. You really are somebody who considers I could get funded here. And it wasn't like some afterthought, but rather, okay, if I get this, how will I do this? That's number one. The second was the extra budget. Here, the most important advice is that if you request an extra budget, you must have a very compelling reason for that. Not so. There is some instrument or some sort of something that you absolutely need to be successful. And it needs to be truly convincing that at your institution, you must have this for yourself. In Switzerland, we are very well equipped when it comes to infrastructure. And I think it will be not so easy for a Swiss PI to make a very compelling argument than it might be for some other locations. Having said that, if it could very well be that you absolutely need a certain piece of equipment and you need it in your lab, a confocal microscope just as an example. Obviously, there are confocal microscopes on campus, but maybe you have experiments running that are going 2 weeks without end, continuously all the time, and this needs to be on this one instrument. There cannot be anyone else using. That's just an example, but it would have to be really convincing. And for Switzerland, you're going to have to explain why you cannot, absolutely not, somehow get this in some other way. This may not be what the ERC wants to hear here. Maybe they would just say, oh, if you have good justifications, you should do it. But I do think we try to keep a little bit in mind, is this really absolutely required at this location for the success of this proposal? And I would just like to say, why? Why are we so carefully thinking about this, and why might we be somewhat extra critical? That's because at the very end, if we every time assign the extra budget, which most people will max out to the 1 million, then it means that there's yet one more person who most of us agreed upon should really be funded here. And this should really happen, that we cannot fund. This is the struggle that we have. Mm-hmm. We would, of course, like to fund our best proposals. And if we nilly-willy hand out extra budget for each, that means one person less. And therefore, but if you have very good reasons, we are doing it. It is happening. And I think other panels are more lenient on that. I just argued strictly for the LS1. Yes, we do things that actually somebody came from the administration and told us, oh, you guys are possibly too strict with your extra budget. You need to think about. So I think there might be differences between panels.
Yeah. Thank you. And before we close, so just what would be then your main take-home message for our applicants here that joined today for strong B1 and B2?
Okay. First, if you can apply or not, I know this is very intimidating, and you may think, oh, wait. Clearly, if you can apply in time, so you can apply one more time. That would be my very minimum that you should definitely strive for. You will learn from this experience. You clearly have to phrase a compelling idea. These will be non-experts. They will more or less have to rely and depend on what you say here. If you make very convincing arguments that this is really important for this field and will make a difference, and is a cool idea, and it's really kind of a great proposal, then this B1, I think you can make. It's absolutely doable with an idea that makes sense for an ERC grant. Mm-hmm. And then in B2, you will have to convince the experts that may or may not be more difficult, but that's also one thing, maybe, and this has been said, your B2 part should not be the same as your B1. You really want to now address, it's a different audience, it's the expert. And keep in mind, I think most of us are mostly looking at B1. That's the one we have the most in our head. And then we might look for detailed things with it, but how is he going to do that? Or how is she proposing to solve this very difficult thing? And that's where you might look carefully. And have they really thought about how this would be done? There was one more important point I just wanted to make. Oh, yes. This was also mentioned. I think your risk assessment and your mitigation is very important. Very important. I should almost do that early on so you don't run out of space. We all run out of space and then we have to squeeze this in. It's very important because it also will be very important for your first application in your interview when you didn't have all the questions yet. It's essentially, people will probably ask these kinds of things. And if you've already very carefully thought about mitigation, that would be helpful. I have one more tip. I think that's one thing I just stuck in my head, and I'm trying to respond to this now, just having been on a panel recently. I think, and this, Giacomo mentioned this, if you can make progress between your application and your interview, that is fantastic, or not? Because the panel sees, oh, okay, they're really excited about this. They're up and running. They really are already having new results. It could be very convincing, could be the deal breaker, actually. A compelling slide with some new evidence that this very audacious idea actually seems to have value. There's clear indications that this might work. And possibly also a collaborator that you added now. You realized since application that there was this one thing that would be very helpful. I mentioned maybe AI for some analysis. It's not your critical part of your proposal, but you now realize this would make it stronger. That is all kinds of things you can do in this period after the application to the interview to already address possible things that might come up.
Okay, from my side at the moment, thank you so much. I hope you can stay with us for the Q&A, and I will open immediately the Q&A. So we are a little bit behind our schedule, but we now